Welcome back. In the previous video, we discussed the relationship of design and architecture of software systems with the software quality. In this video, we will discuss quality assurance approaches for design and architecture. So, quality assessment in design. To evaluate the quality of the design, design reviews are conducted. Software design reviews are systematic, comprehensive, and well-documented inspections of the design to check whether the specified design requirements are adequate and the design meets all the specified requirements. In addition, they also help in identifying the problems in the design process. In design reviews, systems preliminary or detailed design is presented to the design team, for example, users, customers, or other interested parties for comments and their approval. So design reviews usually they have they are conducted in formal or informal ways. So informal views in fact involves those individuals that are directly related to the design of the project. So these individuals in fact review the design and come up with certain recommendations or suggestions and incorporate those suggestions afterwards. Whereas informal reviews, in fact, this type of review includes the experts who are not directly involved in the design, but can review and comment on the design. These reviews are held usually at the end of the design phase to resolve issues related to software design decisions. That is, as we had seen, like architectural design related decisions, detailed design related decisions, or any other decisions that are related to low level designs, etc. So when we are performing design reviews, there are certain items that we should look for in the design. For example, uh, we should see that have all the requirements been addressed, have the requirements related to attributes, for example, reliability, efficiency, maintainability, or programming languages, databases, operating systems, hardware requirements, development requirements, or requirements related to some standards, have all those requirements been addressed during the design. Similarly, the next item that we can look for is ensuring that all important modules are covered and correctly designed in the detailed design. Similarly, assuring that design documents are under configuration or change management. That is, in fact, the design documents, they are being controlled through well-defined procedures. Then the next one is is the design methodology chosen appropriate for the type of software project that is being developed? The next one is compatibility analysis. Here we see that what is a compatibility of this system with the existing software? Have the effects of this design on existing software been identified or not? Similarly, component level uh, issues, they might be looked. For example, like interfaces and data structures and algorithm related issues, for example, or the interfaces to all the components well defined. Similarly, are the main data structures defined? Like, are the algorithms defined? Like, is the data flow or control flow defined? do the data structures and the algorithms that are used, like do they solve the problems or not. Similarly, like there are some procedure level items that should be looked. For example, like is the procedure excessively complex? Could the procedure be broken into like separate and more logical pieces? Like similarly, like does the number of actual parameters match with the number of formal parameters, and like have we specified the local and global functions correctly while in our procedures. Similarly, the next item to look for is the design goals. For example, are the goals of design stated? For example, like goals related to, like for example, reliability, flexibility, maintainability. Are they stated clearly? So, like, does the design satisfy its stated goals, and so on. In fact, these are some standard guidelines or standard rubrics that might be used for evaluating designs. But in fact, different design review teams they follow the design processes, or they adopt the design processes according to their own circumstances. Here on this link, we have a comprehensive design review checklist. It uh, actually contains all of the elements that should be considered while performing the design reviews. We will see this checklist during our online discussion. So, quality assessment in architecture. Architectural analysis is, in fact, the activity of discovering important system properties to avoid, identify, or mitigate risks. In fact, early useful answers about relevant architectural aspects, they are helpful in identifying inappropriate or incorrect design decisions before they are incorporated into the systems. So the choice of, in fact, specific technique for architectural assessment depends on the current phase of the overall project life cycle and the current state of the architecture. For example, early in the project, the architecture may be best evaluated by simply presenting the architecture to the key stakeholders. Later in the project, we may perform a more rigorous and systematic analysis, for example, by executing the system. So, the key stakeholders that may be involved during the architectural assessment are like the architects, developers, the managers, uh, customers, or any representative from the client organization, and the vendors. Now we will discuss the quality assessment approaches for architecture. Mainly there are three types of approaches: the qualitative approaches, quantitative approaches, and scenario-based evaluation of the architecture. So we first see the qualitative approach. In fact, qualitative approach requires experts who are capable of assessing an architecture design even in the absence of any implementation, that is, even the system has not been implemented, yet these experts they are able to assess the design. So such architectural reviews typically consist of some, like there may be some workshop or interviews in which architecture decisions and their relationships to the defined requirements are considered or evaluated. In fact, these design reviews can reveal where design and requirements they are not in alignment with each other. Specifically, one goal of a review is to expose the areas where there is some like architectural drift or like unnecessary complexity. Then quantitative approaches for quality assessment of architecture. These approaches they include, for example, benchmarks, simulations, some metrics, and prototypes. So, benchmarks. In benchmarking, a system is executed by running a number of standard tests or trials to assess the relative performance. Whereas the simulations represent the operations or model the behavior of the system over time. Then quality metrics. Quality metrics are the measure of quality from like specific quality perspectives, such as reliability. Now, the reliability metrics might be, for example, time to failure. Like it is in fact a mean time until a system fails after its last restoration. And other quality metric can be time to repair. For example, it is in fact the mean time until the system is repaired after its last failure. And the time between failures, that might be another quality metric. In fact, it is the mean time between failures. Then another quantitative alternative might be like developing prototypes, as we already know that a prototype is an early sample model or a release of a product built to test a concept or process. So, in fact, quantitative approaches, although they are very like effective in assessing the architecture of a particular system, but a problem with these approaches is that they are in fact really complex and like difficult to it is in fact difficult to perform the quantitative analysis because it might require some additional like hardware resources or some additional infrastructure support to carry out this type of assessment. Then the third technique for uh, assessment of architecture is scenario-based evaluation. In scenario-based evaluation, a divide and conquer approach is applied to evaluate the architecture by focusing on some specific scenarios. So, a well-known scenario-based approach is called architecture trade-off analysis method. This method was in fact developed at Carnegie Mellon's Software Engineering Institute. So this is in fact a human-centric process for identifying the risks early in the software design process. So it mainly focuses on four quality attributes which include modifiability, security, performance, and reliability. The ATM, in fact, ATAM considers a set of scenarios where each scenario is either focused on functionality offered by the system or the qualities exhibited by the system. So that's all about our discussion on quality assurance techniques for software design and architecture, and that also concludes our lecture. So in this lecture, in part 1, we discussed some introductory concepts related to software design and architecture, whereas in part 2, we discussed the relationship of software quality with software design and architecture. And in part 3, we discussed quality assurance approaches for software design and architecture. The materials in this video are based on these two sources. For more details, you can consult these sources. Thank you.